unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
What's up, everybody? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. I'm here with my co-host Ian Gibson. How are you?
I'm doing really good.
So this is not the second to last show, but the third to last show of the year. This will be our college football playoff semifinals or Final Four. I know they're calling it semifinals, but I'm putting it on the video title as Final Four. I kind of, NCAA owns the rights to that phrase, so like they should use it for football too. I would think.
That'd work.
I think that would be. It is specifically branded towards the basketball, but they call it the Frozen Four for hockey.
Yeah.
I think they should just call it Final Four, and it would be. Most of these games have been pretty good once we've gotten to these Final Four. Last year, both Final Four games were good. I feel like that's the case with these two. They're pretty evenly matched teams. I like Indiana a ton. I think they're definitely one of the best balanced teams in the country, top to bottom. I think their talent composite is not that high, but because of their totality of them collectively, I think they make themselves a better option than some of these other teams. But again, Oregon's a really great team. Miami's playing great right now. And Ole Miss is on fire, especially after that great win against Georgia. So let's get into it. We'll get into the first game we've got here is Miami and Ole Miss. This is in Arizona for the Fiesta Bowl. So, Ian, I want to hear your thoughts first, and then I'll give my thoughts.
So this is kind of a clash of two styles. Obviously, Ole Miss with their high-powered offense, and then Miami with their high-powered defense. And we might be repeating what we said last week, but I mentioned with Ole Miss and Georgia, the key was going to be how well is Ole Miss going to attack the Georgia defense? And the answer was effectively well. They got Georgia's defense out of their rhythm, and much of that can be attributed to the athleticism of Trinidad Chambliss. And he was able to, really make some backyard plays. But it was also just the big play capability that Ole Miss has, that they were able to kind of get behind the linebackers and kind of stretch out the middle of the field and attack that way. So the key now for Miami is to clearly stop that. Now, here's the thing. Miami still hasn't played, shall we say, like a really elite offense, at least in a while. The last time I would say they played a really good offense would probably be honestly, might be the Notre Dame game. And even the Notre Dame, I mean, it's mostly a run game, but they haven't played an offense like Ole Miss where they have so many. You have Lacey, you have Chambliss, you have the wide receivers. So the key for me here for Miami is obviously they did a good job containing Tate, Smith. They did a good job of that, the best weapons of Ohio State. Now they got to find a way to do that to contain Chambliss. So I think what they're going to try to do here is have a lot of spy packages in where if he is going to run it, you have to make sure he is not breaking off these 7, 8, 10-yard carries and keeping, broken plays alive. As soon as, you get pressure on him, you need to hit him and hit him hard. I expect them to kind of spread the defensive line wide and have the linebackers play up. One plays as a blitz, the other plays as a possible spy. That way, Ole Miss, Chambliss is going to have to beat him through the air. Again, easier said than done. We saw how well still that even without running the ball, Chambliss can still make big plays through the air. For Miami now, on offense, they're going to have to find a way to, generate more plays. Obviously, the offense still wasn't, until the end of the fourth quarter, wasn't really clicking. Obviously, the pick six and then the one offensive score, but the defense was the one that carried the weight. They are going to need to, the offense really needs to show out now. Now, obviously, the best way to do this is, like I mentioned last week, if you have long, sustained drives, keep that defense out there as long as possible. Give your defense time to rest too, and you will be right where, Ole Miss is going to be playing your game the whole time. If they can do that, if they can wear out Ole Miss's defense and, break through third, fourth quarter, if this game is close going into the third, fourth quarter, it is exactly where Miami wants it because they know how to win these games close. They know how to wear them down, especially through the run game. I think in this one, I think the big deciding factor will be how long can Miami's offense stay on the field? Can they have these long sustained drives, get some points on the board, give their defense a break? And, because if the defense is fresh, if they're getting their breaths in, then they got, obviously it's going to be trouble for Ole Miss. Now, if it's 3 and out, or maybe just 5-6 plays and the defense is right back out there, now you're playing Ole Miss's game because we saw how long those drives took, how much wind it knocked out of Georgia's defense, and once again mentioning with how many times we had Ole Miss guys catching screens or, Lacey running around or Shameless running around. That's a lot of energy to be chasing down some guy. Then you have to go back to the line and then, start the whole play over again for these 8, 9, 10 play drives. So I think the key in this one is how long can Miami sustain drives, and especially if they can put it in the end zone or get points out of it. With that being said, I think this game, again, it's, kind of a clash here. Ole Miss has played these tough defenses before, obviously with Georgia. And Georgia, I do think, has a better offense, shall we say, than Miami. But Miami's defense has just come up clutch all throughout this last, 2 months of the season, especially against Ohio State, which I'm, not really going to be saying anything controversial, but they did. Ohio State does have a better offense than Miami did with better athletes, and they were able to contain, make it very one-dimensional. So with that, I think if I had to pick in this one, just based on what I've seen, I do like Miami in this one. I like Miami with how well they have, adapted to these offenses, especially with how well, they are able to contain these athletes. And I think they're going to be able to do enough of that, especially because that's the thing. You don't need to jump out to a huge lead. It helps. But if you have this game close going into the fourth quarter, that's exactly where Miami wants you. And they're just going to be running the ball, killing the clock, getting down the field, and finally punching in the end zone like they did against Ohio State and like they did against Texas A&M. And if it does come down to where Ole Miss has the ball last, I trust Miami's defense against Ole Miss offense with the ball last than I do the other way around. So I'm going to take the Hurricanes winning this one, and I'm going to go with let's do a 27-21 win for the Canes.
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of what you brought up. I feel like Miami, the last 2 games, the A&M game where they slugged it out to a 10-3 win, and they had that last drive with Fletcher with those big runs, and they get that late touchdown by Tony. And then with the Ohio State game where they had the ball with like 6 minutes left, they run off almost all the clock, and then they run it in with a couple of big plays by Fletcher, Brown, CJ Daniels had a nice screen that went for the first down. And they were able to bleed the clock. I think the thing with Miami is they're willing to play small ball here and stick to limiting the mistakes. They've had a bunch of fumbles, luckily only 2 of them were lost. And Beck has not thrown an interception. He hasn't thrown the ball nearly close to what he was during the regular season. I think that is intentional. I think they are avoiding making Beck make mistakes. There's very little throws downfield, a lot of screens, a lot of short routes. It is moving the ball. They are getting first downs, so it is effective. The defense, I think in that Ohio State game, they had like 3 sacks early, and they didn't get one till later in the game. So, and they got more pressure like very late on that very last drive. But, for the most part, when Ohio State was scoring, they were not getting as much pressure, and Sayin was getting the ball off and connecting. I think Scott is a phenomenal DB. I think he will make some plays in this game. They will need that like he made in the Ohio State game, because that was huge, because that pick 6 basically was the turning point in the whole game. We've talked about that in the previous video. Bain and Mesidor will have big games. They're, stud linemen. The problem is if it gets into a track meet with Ole Miss, and I'll jump into that, which Ole Miss, Chambliss, the guy is a stud. He's a freak. Like, he is just super athletic and makes a ton of plays. I have not seen them in most of the year struggle to score points, maybe outside of like the Florida game, which that one they struggled, but they still ended up winning by 10. They were moving the ball in that Florida game. It's just, I don't know if you remember, they were getting stopped on like the 4th and goal. So like, it was like they were still moving the ball. They just weren't converting. So I expect Ole Miss to do that. And if they do that a ton, then this game could be hugely favoring Ole Miss. But if we've seen the last 3 games, or last 2 games from both these teams, Ole Miss's defense struggles immensely. And not that Tulane game, but specifically Georgia was able to score points. They're able to move the ball a ton on them in both games that they played Georgia. Even Florida was able to score points on Ole Miss's defense, which I think Miami's going to be able to score enough points. If I feel like it's similar to your score, I think I'm going to be maybe like a 27-24 game. I like Ole Miss's field goal kicker a ton, but Miami's kicker has gotten better. He had the struggles against Texas A&M, but that was outside in the wind. It's indoor in the Glendale Stadium, whatever the name is. Who knows? I know it's in Glendale, Arizona. So it should be no conditions that'll be bothersome to the kickers. I expect both kickers to have a good game. I expect, Miami to do enough on defense to withstand Chambliss in their attack. Even though I like Chambliss a ton, I feel like Miami can do enough on defense to thwart them. And then Miami will score enough because Fletcher, and we haven't talked that a ton. The one thing that I probably have noticed is Fletcher is amazing, just gets like huge runs when needed, when called upon. He had a monster game against Ohio State. He had 90 yards. He had a huge game against Texas A&M. The one thing that's missing for this Miami offense the last couple of weeks has been Tony. Malachi Tony has been completely nullified. In that Ohio State game, I mean, he had, I think, he had 3 touches. No, more, sorry. He had 6 touches for like 20 yards. And he had those 2 fumbles. He got lucky that both of them went right back to him. But his punt returns didn't really do much as well. So he was almost non-existent. That is going to be something that they need to have in this game if they really want to compete, which I actually feel like he should have a good game because I don't think highly of Ole Miss's defense. I feel like Tony is probably the difference maker in this game that he hasn't been in the last 2 games. Plus, you add that with Fletcher, that's a deadly mix between those 2. If you're really, utilizing those, Tony on the screens, the direct snaps, maybe even a trick play with Tony taking a handoff and then throwing it. And he usually does a pull to the right side when he throws it. So maybe that's in play at like the 20 or 30 yard line and it gets a touchdown for him. I think, again, if they can limit Beck, make him, basically, he had 130 yards in the Ohio State game, like 100 yards in the Texas A&M game. Just limit him. Like, if it's winning, they're going to have to, win these games very close. I think they're capable. And again, if they might get, a couple of turnovers, they got the turnover in the Ohio State game. That was the difference. Maybe they can get that one here. So I'm going to go with Miami winning 27-24, and maybe like Ole Miss has the ball last, and similar to what a couple of these games where they need to get down the field quickly, and Miami does get the stops by getting QB pressure and maybe some sacks there in Chambliss. So yeah, Miami wins. We both have them winning. So anything else?
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to mention, I was doing homework on the game, and I wanted to confirm that, but this is true. Obviously, the game is being played in Arizona in the Fiesta Bowl, and Miami has never won a Fiesta Bowl, ever.
I thought so.
They have never won. Obviously, the famous ones are the 2003 National Championship against Ohio State and the first unofficial official national championship with Penn State in 1987 or 86. But I think they played. Yeah, it said they played one in the 90s and one in 85, and all the times they are 0-4 in the Fiesta Bowl. So even though we picked Miami, Phoenix or Glendale is not a favorable place for the Hurricanes.
That's what I thought, because when I was like thinking about it, I was like, yeah, I don't think they've won many games out there, so they probably don't have a good experience with going to the stadium. Yeah. But things are always meant to be broken. You have any more thoughts before we move on?
No, that was just the other one, just my little history tidbit, because that was the one thing I thought too was, oh boy, Fiesta Bowl. That's because I just knew in general, I was like, well, they lost in 2003 and they lost in 1986. Those are the famous ones, so that's not good history right there. And then I was like, have they been to others? I don't ever remember seeing them win a Fiesta Bowl. And yep, sure enough, they've never won one. So no better time than the present.
Yeah. Nice tidbit there. Okay, let's move on. Last one. This is the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, and it's going to be Indiana and Oregon. Oregon's going to have to travel across the country. I'm actually wondering if they just stayed on the East Coast instead of traveling back to the West Coast and then traveling back again. I wonder if their plans were like stay there. I have not heard. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But because they had their game in Miami the other day, and now their game's going to be Atlanta. They probably just stayed. That's probably what the contingency plan was if they did win. So, huge game. I love both these teams. I love Dante Moore a ton. He was at UCLA before he got to Oregon. I love Cignetti. I'm, such a huge fan. Since we started talking about him right when they thought that Napier was going to get fired at Florida, it was like, oh yeah, Cignetti, he's the guy. And like everyone like highlighted him, and I just been watching him ever since. And he only has 2 losses since that point, and they've won a Big Ten championship. Then they smoked Alabama in the Rose Bowl, and just, man, they have been such a good team. Like, like I said, as a collective, Indiana is the talent pool, the composite is not very high because a lot of the guys are like 3-star recruits, but them as a team, they just work so well. The offensive line is tremendous. The pressure they bring with the defensive line and the fact that they're able to get, mix and match their pressures. They don't actually just pressure with 4 down linemen. They kind of like bring the linebackers into play, and they mix and match where they do it from. So kind of changes the inflection point where the most pressure is going to come on the offensive line. So they have to keep on their toes. Jones, the linebacker for Indiana, is made a ton of plays in that first Oregon game. And, I went back and rewatched that game, and man, it was a close game, but really, if you look at it, Indiana was able to hold Oregon to 13 total points offensively, and they gave up the pick 6 for a touchdown. But besides that, like I said, 13 points. So that's a huge victory for Indiana there, where they were able to stifle Oregon's offense. And again, Malik Benson in that game had a huge touchdown, which I feel like he's always good for that because he's so fast. If you set up a play to get him loose. It's bound to happen. It happened against James Madison. I can't remember specifically in the Texas Tech game if it did for a long TD. I don't think it did, but he had some plays in there regardless. But, if he breaks free again, he can make a huge play. And, expect Dante Moore to have a good game. But, the one interception he had in the game, Dante, was a tip ball. So if he can just eliminate that, it's hard because tip balls just happen. Even Fernando Mendoza had some tip balls in these games. So it's hard to keep a clean game. You're going to get that to happen. But run game wise, I think both these teams are stout. They both have two groups of excellent running backs. Davison for Oregon mainly, and then Hemby and Black for Indiana. Surratt is such a stud, like wide receiver. I expect to see him on Sundays in the NFL when he goes. And he had a huge game in this Indiana game, or in this Oregon-Indiana game earlier in the year. And he even missed a couple of balls. So he was targeted like at least 12 times in that game. And he came up with 8 catches, had the huge touchdown to go ahead. And, Mendoza, he's solid, honestly, very solid. Obviously, Heisman winner. Expect to have a similar game around, 200 to 230 yards passing. And, Cooper and Becker, just stud wide receivers making plays. And Nowakowski, tight end, making plays as well. So I honestly like Indiana a ton. I feel like Dante has a bevy of options as well, not just Malik Benson, but Sadiq and Johnson and Bryant and DeCarrion Moore. So, he's got options there, but I just like this Indiana team a ton. I feel like if it comes down to a close game, Sappington, he missed a field goal in the game in Eugene. So that might be a problem where, field goal kicking wise for Indiana is not a problem because they had what's his face? Radicic. No, it wasn't Radicic that hit it. It was Frank or however you say his name. Brendan Frank hit the 58-yarder. So that was huge. Between the two kickers there for Indiana, they're solid there and they made those field goals. And that was the difference in the game because, hitting that 58-yarder, what was it? The last second of the first half really kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. And so those points add up when close games happen. So I expect the same thing. I think Indiana has the advantage in the special teams. And then Oregon, they're right there. They're definitely one of the best teams in the country. And they've shown it so far in these first 2 games in the playoff. But I expect Indiana to take this one. And I'm going to say probably something similar to the score that we had in Eugene. I'm going to say a 31 to 19 game. What do you got?
Yeah, and obviously, but it's funny because both coaches, Dan Lanning and Kurt Cignetti, they both mentioned how difficult it is. Cignetti mentioned how difficult it is to beat the same team twice, especially a good one. We have literally talked a dictionary levels worth about how difficult it is in our time covering college football on this show to beat the same team twice. And he mentioned that, and obviously Dan Lanning kind of said, well, it's hard to beat Indiana once. Yeah. So it's funny because you have 2 psychopaths in terms of attention to detail going at it. So this game, should be a lot of fun. Look, again, to kind of simplify it, and this is something I've said about Oregon. I said this about them playing Texas Tech. I am still waiting for them to play a complete game. I mentioned it in, when we talked about the review and beforehand. I am waiting for, Oregon to have that full 4-quarter game because, obviously they had the close game against Penn State before, Penn State fell off the cliff. Then they lose to Indiana. And then they had close games against Wisconsin. They scraped by against Iowa. They did blow out Minnesota, which was expected. and then they beat USC soundly, and then Washington was a bit hairy. With that being said, the defense has done a fantastic job this whole time of being the consistent part of this team. They have been able to, at a lot of times, bail out the offense and make sure that, anytime, maybe more made an interception or there was like a 3-and-out, the defense would pick up right where they left off. Now, obviously, they know firsthand experience, it gets way harder now because now you have, without a doubt, the best offense in the country that just boat raced Alabama out of the water, and now they're coming straight for you. So I think in this game, like I said, it's going to come down to Oregon playing a full 4 quarters, and it's going to come down to how well the offense performs. You have guys like and that's the frustrating thing is we know how good this Oregon team can be. Dante Moore is still one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and he's got, guys like Benson, Winnington on the run game. They have talent everywhere. So they have the potential of pulling off the upset here, and especially with how well the defense is. But even with that being said, even if they play a full 4 quarters, which I think they did a pretty good job against Indiana the first time, Indiana does a fantastic job that if you make a mistake, they will make you pay for it dearly. It's not just like, oh, they're going to score a touchdown. They are going to bury you. One example, look at what happened to Alabama after they got stopped on 4th down in the Rose Bowl. So with Indiana, I mean, the big thing is going to be obviously keeping with the game plan. It might sound like rat poison to Indiana, but there's not a whole lot you should be able to change from the Alabama game to this Oregon game, especially with how effective the run game was towards the second half. If Hemby is still, breaking off these runs, if the running game is still getting 7 yards per carry, there is no need to stop because that makes it way easier for Mendoza for play action passes, for when he does drop back because the linebackers and secondaries playing up. Then you can hit, Cooper out deep and they can hit the big plays. I think that is going to be the key in this game. Who can make more big plays? Obviously, we know Oregon can. They have the speed for it, but Indiana with their play design can do it too. With that being said, same thing with Indiana's defense too. I mean, it was phenomenal against Alabama, and they did a great job stopping Ohio State, and we saw how they can do this against Oregon. But doing it twice is going to be really hard. I mean, it's really tough for me. I feel like this is going to be a much closer game. I mean, obviously the first time around it was close, but I feel like Indiana and these guys are in Oregon is going to be down to the wire again. If it's going to come down to who makes bigger plays, who can hit the bigger plays, I like Indiana doing that more than Oregon. And I just trust Indiana playing a full 4 quarters, especially on offense, than I do Oregon right now. So I'm going to take the Hoosiers winning. I'm going to go with a close one. I'm going to go with let's do like a 30-27 win, like a really close game.
Nice. Do you have any more thoughts? I think I'm done as far as like previewing this. I don't have anything else more to add.
I mean, Big Ten's going to have another team in the playoff for what is it now? So they had
Michigan.
Yeah. They had Michigan, then they, Ohio State, now Indiana. So that's 3 years in a row they'll be in the national championship, and now the SEC's last hope is Ole Miss. So they were mentioning it too. It's funny they were talking about how the transfer portal, NIL, blah blah blah, how a lot of teams we thought would just be like amalgamated into the even bigger giants. But we're going to have another unique champion for the 3rd time in a row. Besides, because Ohio State didn't win a national title since 2014, Michigan hadn't won one since '97. And now we're either going to have Oregon, Indiana, Ole Miss, or Miami, who Miami hasn't won since 2001. Ole Miss hasn't won since the Soviet Union was still a thing. And Oregon and Indiana have never won it. So this is really fun to see because we were so used to the 4-team playoff of it being Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and then whatever, Cinderella team that would get, completely curb stomped by Bama in the first round. So with that, I do like about the playoff is that we're getting more unique champions and more unique matchups. We're finally settling in on the field.
I love it. I've been a huge proponent of the expanded playoff ever since it was a possibility. And I'm pretty sure I have a Facebook status update talking about knowing that, like talking about that, like the day of, like it was like the day of the first playoff when Florida State played Oregon. And I was like saying how like it could lead to more. And like you knew, like it was always rumors, whatever. But like the fact that they pulled the trigger, and now that we have 12 teams and it could be even 16 next year. And then, you know, it's so much more of a like fair system. It brings these smaller schools into it. It, you know, you actually have to play well in these games to earn it. You can't just like back into a championship. Like, you know, Florida State got lucky and played Auburn that year. Auburn was like 2 plays away from being a 5-loss team. And like, you know, so like that doesn't happen anymore. Like you actually have to play good teams for like 3 or 4 weeks. And if you're not good enough, you're not going to win. And like, that's what it felt like last year. It felt like Ohio State was the best team and Notre Dame was the second best team. Like it felt like we got the best championship. And I feel like with these 2 matchups, we're going to get the best teams at the end of the year. And that's all we can ask for. Like people complain the BCS was better, blah, 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 all this. No.
Oh, man. Oh, no, it wasn't.
I know. Trust me. I agree.
I mean, man, if you want to look how bad it was, look at that 2011 title. Oh, man.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, it was atrocious that we had to deal with that. And that was the 2011 game was what got us the playoff. So thank goodness that happened. You know, like the fact that, you know, LSU and Alabama played each other again. That was the whole reason that we got, you know, the expanded into a playoff. And thank goodness it worked. It, you know, things have done well. The viewership is high. People like these games. You know, people are tuned in. I know people are going to watch these last 2 games and then watch the championship. And it's like, it's exciting. This is what it should be. It's what it should have been 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago. They should have just had a playoff. I don't know why they felt like the need to do bowl games. And it is what it is. We're here now and we're moving forward and it feels great. And I'm excited for the potential of even, you know, yes, 16, but maybe even 24 with all the conference champions get in, which would be great. Yep. Okay. Any other thoughts?
The only thing that I'll mention too, I did a little quick search. Obviously, neither of these teams have a lot of history in Atlanta and the Peach Bowl. Indiana has been to 2 Peach Bowls in their history. One of them was in 1987 and 1990. Both times they lost. And this is Oregon's first time ever at the Peach Bowl. So somebody's going to win the Peach Bowl for the first time in their history coming up, which makes sense because I mean, very rarely would you see a West Coast team play the Peach or Orange Bowl back then. So it makes sense how Oregon's never been in one.
Yeah, true. Okay. That is the show, everyone. We're not going to have a show on Wednesday. This is the preview show for these games. And then we will come back next Sunday on, I don't know what day that is. What is it? So the 11th. So January 11th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Check us out at haterradio.com for all of our articles. Ian, what's your socials before we go?
Yeah, at X, it's at G5 Gibson, and at YouTube and Instagram, it's at G_Gator_G.
Okay, like, subscribe, comment, follow. Help us out with the algorithm. We appreciate all your support. We will talk to you guys on Sunday. Enjoy these games, and I'll see you next weekend. All right, take care.